Afternoon and welcome. It's nice to walk through the halls of Dirksen and see kids trick-or-treating. It gave me a smile. Then it made me sad that I wasn't home. So I could say I could be with my kids, and now it's like I could be with my grandkids on this occasion. But we have important work here, and I'm delighted to have the opportunity to bring our committee together and take a look at disability issues. And I thank our witnesses for your presence here today. Senator Blumenthal is on his way. We have a 5 o'clock vote. I'm going to try to get us started, and that means I should stop doing intro and begin the hearing. But I want to say a few things first. Again, appreciate the witnesses that are here. We want your insight and perspective on this issue and know it will benefit us as legislators and will be helpful to veterans and their families that we certainly aim to serve. Our nation owes those who have served in uniform not only gratitude, but a steadfast commitment to provide health care, benefits, and support they've earned through their service. It's our collective duty to make certain that we are doing everything possible to help veterans lead successful and fulfilling lives after their military service. This obligation forms the foundation of this committee's work and the focus of today's hearing. Disability claims process is intended to make certain that those who have a lasting injury, visible or invisible, from their service receive the care and compensation they deserve. Recent articles published by the Washington Post have raised concerns and frustrations within the veteran community. I have heard from numerous veterans and groups who are frustrated that these articles have left an impression that the veterans are engaging in widespread fraud in the disability claim space. The cases of fraud highlighted in these articles do not reflect the reality of who veterans are, the vast majority of veteran population, or the values veterans embody. Veterans put country before self, from their decision to serve to the oath they swore. The attention that these stories have received provides us with an opportunity to have an important discussion about whether this system we have built is serving the needs of veterans today and how we can reform it to better serve those who were designed to help. We have an obligation to the men and women who have injuries or illnesses connected with their service in uniform to make certain they are provided the tools and resources they need to succeed in life after the military. Our goal today is to examine the facts. Is the system ensuring timely, accurate, and fair outcomes? Is it empowering veterans to thrive or inadvertently creating barriers to their success and opportunities after service? Today, we will hear from the VA Inspector General Cheryl Mason, whose office is responsible for helping to root out fraud and abuse in the VA system and who has extensive experience in the disability claims system as the former chairwoman of the Board of Veterans Appeals. Representatives from 3 of our nation's largest, most active veteran service organizations who represent various veteran constituencies day in and day out in the disability claim process. A representative from the Government Accountability Office who has published numerous reports and made numerous recommendations on how to improve oversight and management of the disability claims process, and Daniel Gade, who is a service-connected disabled veteran and a vocal advocate for changing the current disability system to better serve veterans and support their long-term well-being. This is not the first and will not be the last conversation we have in exploring how to better serve veterans and improve disability system to compensate veterans for their service-connected conditions and help them live lives, strong, successful, fulfilling lives after their military service. I look forward to the constructive discussion that I anticipate will take place here, and we'll give Chairman or Ranking Member Blumenthal, no promotion intended, Ranking Member Blumenthal the opportunity to offer his opening statement as soon as he sits down.
Thank you.
You must have heard me call you Chairman, and you immediately arrived.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
You're welcome.
Thank you to all of our witnesses. We have more than the usual number, and we welcome you here. We appreciate your public service as veterans and afterward as advocates of our veterans. Today's hearing is really focused on our nation's obligation to men and women in uniform and the system we use to compensate any of them who become ill or injured due to their service. We all know that the system inherited by Secretary Collins was not perfect, but it was providing historic levels of benefits to toxic exposed veterans, thanks to the bipartisan PAC Act, which all of us on this committee, I think, supported in a very bipartisan way. That same system is being dismantled through a series of really reckless policies, in my view, that have pushed hardworking civil servants who process disability claims to the brink of what they can do. In fact, the administration's draconian deferred resignation program, return to office policy, hiring freeze, arbitrary contract cancellation, and other morale-crushing initiatives have driven out more than 1,800 mission-critical VBA employees. The result has been a demoralized VBA workforce who is consistently pushed to sacrifice quality for the sake of quantity. There simply are not enough people doing these jobs for the work to be performed capably at a level that our veterans deserve. It's created more work for claims processors, and today we're going to hear from our VSO witnesses on how this abdication in the name of modernization is impacting the veterans you represent. I also want to hear your response to those who believe that VA disability compensation is too generous. Not my view. That's how the system has been portrayed by some opponents of the system in past years. The articles fail to understand or capture the purpose of the benefit. Instead, they cherry-pick anecdotes to wrongly claim that disability benefits is fraught with widespread fraud. There is, in fact, some wrongdoing and fraud. We need to root it out, investigate and prosecute it, but not abandon a system of compensation that is deserved and needed by veterans, our heroes who serve and sacrifice for our country. I want to say, finally, the current VA leadership has repeatedly violated the Hatch Act by blurring the lines between governance and political campaigning. That is unacceptable. And there used to be bipartisan pushback to such behavior. I hope there will be again. Veterans deserve a VA that works for them, whether they are Democrats or Republicans, and avoids pushing partisan messages. I will continue to fight for the improvement and expansion of earned VA benefits, and I appreciate all of you here who are advocating for that cause. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Blumenthal, thank you. Testifying on today's witness panel is the Honorable Cheryl Mason, the VA's Inspector General, Mr. Jeremy Villanueva, Associate Legislative Director for Paralyzed Veterans of America, Mr. John Retzter, Deputy National Director for Disabled American Veterans, Ryan Galashusi, I'm so sorry for all of you, Executive Director for the Veterans of Foreign Wars, and I know each and every one of you, retired Colonel, Dr. Daniel Gade, who is a retired United States Army Lieutenant Colonel, Ms. Elizabeth Curta, the Director of Education, Workforce, Income, Security Issues at the Government Accountability Office. Thank you all again for being here. Ms. Mason, you are now recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman Moran. Chairman Moran, Ranking Member Blumenthal, and members of this committee, I am pleased to be here today to discuss this
Cheryl,
important
would you pull the mic a little closer?
I'm sorry,
please?
closer to the mic?
That'd be
Thank
great.
you. There we go. Better? Thank you. I am pleased to be here today to discuss this important topic. Having been on the job as VA OIG for just over 3 months, I am impressed by the dedication and significant oversight that my OIG team provides to combat fraud, waste, and abuse, and to improve the effectiveness and efficiencies of VA programs and operations in service to our veterans, their families, caregivers, and survivors. The veterans who serve this country have made sacrifices to do so, some with their lives, others through the challenges of their individual service. Members of this committee have led efforts in passing legislation to expand benefits for veterans over many years, such as the PACT Act. You know how important it is for the government to keep its promise to our veterans and their families. Most deserve and have earned the benefits and services the VA provides to them. As the daughter and spouse of veterans, and someone who has made it her lifelong commitment to champion veterans, I find it reprehensible for any person or entity to suggest that many veterans are hustling or scamming to get benefits. Furthermore, using OIG investigative evidence collected over several years to make it appear like there is mass fraud by veterans misleads the public and maligns veterans. While yes, there are some bad actor veterans who do commit fraud against VA in both benefits and health care, they are few in comparison to the 6.9 million veterans and beneficiaries who receive VA benefits. Our OIG's investigative metrics indicate that approximately 3.7% of our active fraud investigations are veterans suspected of fraud in VA's compensation benefits programs. My special agents' investigative portfolios include violent crimes, threats, ethic violations, and theft, as well as allegations of fraud schemes related to a wide variety of VA programs comprised of education, fiduciary compensation, loan guarantee contracts, and health care, just to name a few. The largest percentage of fraud in VA programs and operations is perpetrated against VA and veterans, and my team investigates these allegations to the full extent of the law and prosecutes them to the full extent of the law with the help of DOJ. But VA OIG is not one-dimensional. We are here not just to stop fraud, but also to prevent it. And one of the ways we do so is through the collaboration of our accomplished staff in our Disability Fraud Work Group, sharing information and data across the organization to ensure that veterans who have earned their benefits receive them, and that people who defraud VA programs are held accountable. My Office of Audits and Evaluations conducts reviews of VA programs and operations, including all of VBA's business lines, and makes recommendations for improvement. These recommendations include ensuring that claims raters consistently apply the correct laws and policies, that leaders strengthen contracts for better, more accurate medical disability exams, monitor and review fiduciaries' actions, establish guardrails and procedures for educational programs, and test existing automation methods and outcomes. Weaknesses in guidance, application of the law, implementation of policy, and lack of controls and oversight increase the probability of fraud against VA and its veterans. Additionally, OIG provides fraud alerts about potential fraudulent actions, from pension poaching to entities offering fake documentation and promises and guarantees regarding outcomes and VA benefits. We provide training and information on how to recognize and report fraud to the OIG. As the VA IG, I take my duty to be impartial and independent very seriously. Our work at OIG is based on the facts and circumstances and evidence of each situation. And as IG, I can assure you that VA OIG is committed to fighting fraud and recommending efficiencies in VA's management of programs and operations. In the past 3 months, we have increased our efforts to work across all directorates so that our subject matter experts can be force multipliers and share their knowledge to protect the benefits and services that our veterans have earned. Mr. Chairman, this concludes my statement. I look forward to answering the questions the committee may have and working with you, your staff, and this committee to improve oversight of VA and the lives of veterans by ensuring they receive and retain the benefits they earned. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Villanueva.
Thank you. Chairman Moran, Ranking Member Blumenthal, members of the committee. I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you today on behalf of Paralyzed Veterans of America about the importance of VA disability compensation to veterans with spinal cord injuries and disorders. Due to the nature of their injuries and illnesses, our members require a wide range of services and benefits, including health care, specially adapted housing, adaptive equipment for their vehicles, and financial compensation that are tailored to their needs. It's disgraceful when disabled veterans are portrayed as fraudsters and cheats simply for accessing earned benefits. To be fair, PVA acknowledges that there are some veterans who attempt to defraud the VA. However, these instances are few and far between. It's a disservice to the sacrifices of the many men and women who have served this nation to suggest that large sums of money are being wasted simply because veterans received earned benefits for service-connected conditions. In truth, Many veterans find it difficult to file even a basic claim for disability. This is why PVA has service officers throughout the country to help veterans navigate the VA's complex disability process. We have gone on record numerous times to discuss ways to make the disability compensation system less vulnerable to fraud and waste while ensuring that veterans are fairly compensated for their conditions. Today, I would like to focus on two of those ways: ensuring C&P exams and reviewing DBQs for quality assurance. First, VA must ensure proper C&P exams. When a veteran files for a claim for disability compensation, a thorough examination is crucial to an accurate outcome. The alternative could mean years of appeals for the veterans to receive their earned benefits. We have heard from our service officers that they routinely see a lack of expertise in specific medical specialties among contracted C&P examiners, which delays the adjudication of veterans' claims. PVA strongly believes medical examinations for complex, service-related conditions such as SCID and TBI should be conducted by VA doctors. Regardless, the VA must ensure that any contracted C&P examiners are qualified to conduct necessary exams, and any legislative proposals supporting contract exams should include such provisions. Equally important to the qualifications of the provider is an accessible, barrier-free facility to conduct C&P exams. Our members have seen exam rooms that are physically inaccessible and/or lack overhead patient ceiling lifts, causing members to pause and wonder why the VA is sending them to facilities that are ill-equipped to accommodate them. Another barrier encountered by SCID veterans is getting to the contract facility. Several of our members have been expected to travel more than 100 miles to reach the contracted facility, even while the veteran is critically ill. VA and third-party vendors' policies regarding these situations need to be examined, and greater use of telehealth exams and traveling examiners should be made. Second, VA must properly review DBQs for quality assurance. PVA believes that the VA could improve the quality control review of incoming DBQs to help ensure that exams are proper and any fraud is caught early in the claims process. Currently, VA claims processors have the authority to weigh the value of DBQs provided by the veteran if they believe there might be fraud. VA has roughly 20 quality analysts who review DBQs from VA contractors. However, these examiners only review a sample size for contractual compliance. Additionally, they only have access to these DBQs once they are uploaded to VBMS. So often they're reviewing them after a final decision. These examiners should be given greater oversight authority, be allowed to review all DBQs that are submitted, and have access to them prior to uploading them to VBMS. In conclusion, PVA strongly believes that addressing areas where VA can be more efficient would benefit veterans and ensure the integrity of the benefits system. Thank you once again for the opportunity to present our views on VA's disability claims process. We look forward to continuing our work with you to ensure that veterans get timely access to all the benefits that they have earned and deserve. And I would be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Jeremy, thank you. Mr. Retzer.
Chairman Moran, ranking members Blumenthal, and members of the committee, thank you for inviting DAV to testify today on the VA Disability Compensation Program, its vital role in supporting veterans, their families, caregivers, and their survivors, and the challenges VA faces in delivering timely and accurate decisions. Last year alone, DAV assisted over 1.1 million veterans and survivors. We filed more than 560,000 claims and took over 3.1 million actions on their behalf at no cost. These numbers are staggering, but they are not just statistics. They represent veterans living with life-altering injuries, chronic illnesses, invisible wounds such as PTSD. Many face barriers with employment, health care, and activities of daily living. Behind every claim is a personal sacrifice and a genuine need. Before I turn to recommendations, I must address a recent article of the Washington Post that grossly misrepresented disabled veterans and the VA disability compensation system. The Post claimed veterans are swamping the VA with fraudulent or dubious claims. According to the VA Office of Inspector General, fewer than 200 fraud convictions occur each year. With nearly 3 million claims processed annually, that's a fraud rate of 1/100th of 1%. The article also labeled conditions such as tinnitus, eczema, chronic pain, hypertension, diabetes, depression, and even PTSD as dubious. These are conditions Congress and VA has long recognized as service-connectable conditions. Furthermore, the Post mischaracterized the PACT Act. The Appeals Modernization Act is a loophole to abuse when these laws exist to deliver long overdue justice. The VA disability adjudication process is legally binding, highly regulated, and evidence-based. Service connection generally requires current diagnosed disability, an in-service event or exposure, and medical nexus linking the two. However, presumptive service connection has an exception that allows VA to grant benefits when scientific and historical evidence shows veterans in certain places and locations were exposed. Claims undergo multi-layered review by rating specialists and compensation and pension examiners to ensure accuracy and compliance. Fraud is an exception. It is not systemic. Now let me turn to our recommendations. First, VA must have resources to maintain claims accuracy and timeliness. Backlog surged from 150,000 in 2022 to over 400,000 in 2024 due to the PACT Act and also the outreach for veterans crisis. Thanks to the increasing staffing, the numbers is now about 135,000. Continued progress depends on sustaining VBA funding, strategic use of overtime, and close monitoring of staffing needs. Second, we must simplify the claims process. Veterans should be able to file a claim by telephone. The VA claims process is well recognized as non-adversarial, and claims processors should construe claims to maximize benefits. VA's requirements that veterans specify a single benefit on a VA intent to file form can unfairly delay and reduce payments. If a veteran checks only one box but later qualifies for another benefit, they lose retroactive entitlement. This rule should be removed. Third, VBA must optimize technology. Artificial intelligence, document digitization, and data mining can transform claims processing. But accuracy, oversight, and staff support are essential. VBA and its contractors must develop IT systems that integrate with accredited veteran service organizations for filing claims and appeals. The new accredited representative portal was developed without consulting DAV or other major accredited veteran service organizations. It is advisable that VBA and its contractors seek input and collaboration with DAV and other major accredited veteran service organizations on future enhancements and new system builds to ensure usable, accuracy, and alignment with veterans' needs. Finally, improve the presumptive making process for toxic exposed veterans, expanding research, creating independent scientific review processes, and establishing stakeholder oversight will help end decades-long wait for toxic exposed veterans. Presumptive rules not only deliver justice, they allow VBA to adjudicate large cohorts efficiently, reducing delays and appeals. Mr. Chairman, the veterans we represent are counting on this committee to ensure the system works for them, not against them, to every veteran, so that every veteran has an opportunity to have success after their service. Thank you. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Mr. Gallucci.
Thank you. Chairman Moran, Ranking Member Blumenthal, members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to testify on behalf of the VFW. When Americans raise their right hand, they sign a binding contract to surrender freedoms, obey orders, and if called, march into combat. In return, our nation promises care and benefits. That promise is not charity, it's a contract. For our enlistees, it's enshrined in DD Form 4. Every veteran who served honorably has kept their end of that contract. Yet lately, headlines question whether our veterans really deserve it. The Washington Post, The Economist, and others have said that benefits are absurdly generous, that fraud is rampant, or suggest that a disability industrial complex of VSOs profits off the system. We've heard it before. In the 1930s, when the Economy Act slashed benefits at the recommendation of Archibald Roosevelt, and in the 1950s, when Omar Bradley chaired a commission that tried to strip benefits from the less disabled and questioned toxic exposure. We buried those bad ideas then, and it is our duty to bury those bad ideas today. Fraud exists in large systems, Medicare, Social Security, and yes, VA, but it's rare and it's prosecuted when it's found. What's not rare are the invisible wounds of war, PTSD, traumatic brain injury, chronic pain, or cancers caused by toxic exposure. To claim these wounds are embellished or fake is either ignorant or cruel. Invisible does not mean imaginary. Reporting like the Post's misrepresents key facts. They tell readers that more than 500,000 veterans are service-connected for seemingly minor skin conditions, failing to note that 76% of these veterans are rated at 0%. If you add in 10% ratings, which often do not affect compensation, that number jumps to nearly 94%. The data set does not support rampant exaggeration and fraud. Plus, the Post conveniently ignores the unique occupational hazards of military service and why skin and foot conditions are so common. There's a reason it's called trench foot. It is easier to claim benefits in 2025, but this is a feature, not a flaw. Reforms like the PACT Act leveled the playing field for those poisoned by burn pits and toxics and other toxins. We fought deliberately to improve access because past generations have suffered in silence. PTSD claims have drastically risen in recent years, but it's naive to think PTSD is new. Past conflicts labeled it soldier's heart or shell shock, and it was a condition we tried to hide. Today, veterans talk about mental health because it's okay to have PTSD and it's okay to claim your benefits. Because we talk about it, veterans are fighting stigma for all Americans. The cost may seem jarring, but this is the sobering true cost of 2 wars many households could afford to overlook. Disability compensation is the settlement of a debt for the social and occupational losses associated with the real and persistent hazards of military service. A paycheck doesn't erase a missing limb, and a steady job doesn't cure a damaged lung. The all-volunteer force understands that military service is dangerous. We choose to serve because service is authentic and necessary. And in our contracts, the United States committed to make us whole when we were ordered to combat or other hazardous situations. Unfortunately, perverse incentives exist, such as concurrent receipt kicking in at 50% disability, or family care that kicks in at 100%. Bad policy can drive bad behavior, but Congress should fix the policy and not blame the veteran. On fraud, let's talk about claim sharks, who often promise benefit increases by submitting questionable evidence for a hefty and illegal cut of the action. The VFW has led the fight against this scourge, not to profit, but to support veterans and protect the non-adversarial benefit process. The VFW has testified before Congress 15 times over the last 3 years, raising this alarm. We've had countless conversations with the committee seeking to stop the fleecing of veterans and taxpayers, but our calls have gone unheeded, and we're now targets of the Washington Post, accusing VSOs of embellishing. Our accredited representatives are bound by strict ethics regulations in 38 CFR. We tell veterans what they need to know, not what they want to hear. And we invited the VA General Counsel to audit our training in 2021, an offer that still stands 4 years later. It costs VFW and our partners tens of millions of dollars each year to provide this service because every veteran deserves an honest advocate, not a profiteer. Our veterans didn't ask what was in the air they breathed or the water they drank, and unlike many other public servants, they can't just walk away if they don't want to do it anymore. We serve in accordance with the contract we signed, and many now live with the illnesses that steal their sleep, breath, and ability to work. Suggesting they embellish their suffering for some money is insulting. The VA system must work better. Simpler forms, improved access to exams, and reliable technology. But veterans and their VSOs are not the problem. We appear before Congress dozens of times every year asking for some nuanced reforms that sometimes come to fruition, other times don't. And as we speak, the government shutdown disrupts our work as critical deadlines approach. Veterans can't afford to wait. We must reopen the government to avoid unnecessary pain and hardship for our defenders. Members of the committee, the all-volunteer forces carried this nation through the last quarter century of war. We kept our promise. Now the nation must keep its word. It's time for all of us to honor the contract. Thank you, and I look forward to answering any questions the committee may have.
Thank you. Dr. Gade.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for the opportunity to testify on the VA disability compensation system. My testimony will differ from most you've heard. I'm a member of no veteran service organization and have no motive other than to help restore the lives and dignity of millions of veterans. For too long, you've been told that the best way to care for veterans is to shovel billions of taxpayer dollars into their pockets. This approach has resulted in a veteran class that is sicker, more marginally employed, and more suicidal than ever. By paying veterans to be sick, we create more sick veterans, separated from meaningful lives of purpose, and we deepen our suicide crisis. I developed this perspective through hard experience and long study. I was wounded in combat twice, losing my right leg and spending a year at Walter Reed. After recovery, I earned a master's degree and joined the White House Domestic Policy Council, where my previously acquired user-level experience was bolstered by my work alongside both the Joel Shalala Commission and the Scott Commission. I later completed a PhD in public policy focused on the VA claims process, and while teaching at West Point, co-led the Independence Project, a randomized control trial demonstrating the powerful link between employment and health. In 2021, I published Wounding Warriors, How Bad Policy is Making Veterans Sicker and Poorer, and recently served 2 years as Virginia's Commissioner of Veteran Services. The surge in disability claims is not due to combat injuries, but to a culture that rewards illness. Last year alone, over 450,000 new compensation recipients entered the system, while total combat wounded from the global war on terror number around 50,000. Last year, more than 270,000 veterans began receiving compensation for tinnitus, which is 100 times the number of GWAT amputees over a 20-year period. Blessedly high survival rates from combat wounds are not the cause of the growth. This lie allows advocates to tuck every veteran disability claim under a cloak of virtue. Instead, the avalanche of claims is driven by nonprofits and pay-to-play claims companies that encourage veterans to selectively exaggerate or falsify symptoms to, quote, grab all they can, end quote. Aging, genetic, and lifestyle conditions are increasingly labeled service-connected, resulting in tens or hundreds of thousands of veterans rated as 100% disabled who have no true incapacity or whose incapacity would have eventuated regardless of service status. I propose 2 principles of reform. 1, meaningful employment is powerful medicine. A 2020 paper called Employment a, quote, critical mental health intervention. Unfortunately, veteran participation in the labor market, especially among men in prime working years, is markedly lower than their civilian counterparts and has been steadily declining over the past 20 years. Disability compensation discourages work by rewarding inactivity. Some programs, like IU, create a direct barrier to work. Any separation from the labor force causes isolation, malaise, and reduced income, coupled with a demand for ever higher disability payments. We should shift dollars from paying veterans to be sick towards meaningful incentives for gaining and maintaining productive employment. Early positive incentives can have a long-lasting positive effect, as demonstrated by the Independence Project. 2, disability compensation is a destructive goal. Disability is a negative word. In Latin, dis means not, opposite of, or apart. The disability compensation system pulls veterans into a destructive identity as, quote, disabled veteran, rather than helping create a positive, forward-looking life and career. This system is anti-thriving, anti-productivity, and ultimately anti-veteran. Further, it discourages future generations serving by painting veterans as a troubled problem class. The compensation system traps veterans into a disability identity, teaching them to chase 100% rating as a proof of honor or source of validation. 9 of the top 10 conditions for newly rated veterans are easily exaggerated or totally unverifiable. We need a system that affirms veterans' capacity to thrive, not their presumed fragility. Here are several steps that would protect the integrity of the system. 1, treat but do not compensate for non-disabling conditions and eliminate conditions caused by genetics, aging, or lifestyle from the compensation rolls. Sleep apnea is one obvious example. There are hundreds of others. 2, require active treatment for compensated mental health conditions. If compensation is warranted, so is care. 3, extend VA medical eligibility to all service-connected conditions without tying it to disability ratings, removing an incentive for false claims. The current disability system robs veterans of purpose and dignity, trapping them in idleness and despair. Further, the isolation brought on by separation from the labor market can and does send many veterans into a morass of tragic consequences. Reform will be difficult. Entrenched interests protect the status quo, but it is essential. A close look at past changes shows that what survives the legislative and rulemaking process are usually additions to existing programs or the creation of new programs. The VA budget grows inexorably despite the system causing immense ongoing harm. Deep structural reform will save lives and restore what veterans truly need: meaning, work, and hope. And to Senator Tuberville, I say, War Eagle.
Ms. Curda.
Good afternoon, Chairman Moran, Ranking Member Blumenthal, and members of the committee. I'm pleased to discuss GAO's work on VA's management and modernization of its disability compensation program. VA has taken various steps to improve this program. However, VA is a large, decentralized organization where efforts to bring about positive change can face strong headwinds. As a result of this situation, we put VA's disability compensation program on our high-risk list. This is a list of programs GAO considers to be high risk because there's significant waste, mismanagement, or a need for broad-based transformation. In the case of disability compensation, VA has been trying to update and modernize the program for years with limited success. Underpinning many of these problems are VA leaders and managers not fully leveraging leading practices to manage the disability compensation program. These are practices like setting goals, developing plans to achieve the goals, collecting data, and assessing results. These practices set up organizations for success. Here, that means providing accurate and equitable decisions on compensation claims for veterans with service-connected disabilities. To some, talk like this of management practices may seem quite dry and technical. However, effective management of the disability compensation program can help VA meet veterans' needs by providing timely and accurate decisions. It can also save taxpayer dollars by reducing mistakes and costly rework. My testimony today discusses first, VA's longstanding challenges with managing changes to the disability compensation program. Second, challenges to ensuring the quality of disability compensation decisions. And third, policy approaches that disability commissions and others have raised for modernizing VA's disability benefit structure. For the first area on managing changes to the program, one key example of a longstanding challenge is VA's efforts to update its rating schedule. VA continues to rely on outdated medical and earnings loss information in the rating schedule to determine whether veterans qualify for disability benefits. VA's updates of the medical information in the rating schedule have been slow. VA is 10 years behind its goal. While VA officials have updated many of the body systems, several systems remain outdated. Moreover, the rating schedule has not been comprehensively adjusted since its creation in 1945. Past studies found that, given all the changes in the labor market, veterans were not being equitably compensated under this 1940s model. For the second area, on ensuring the quality of decisions, our prior work has identified challenges to VA providing high-quality disability exams for veterans and training for claims processors. These exams and training are key for accurately processing veterans' claims and preventing fraud, costly delays, and rework. For example, we recently made 5 recommendations to strengthen VA's oversight of contracted medical exam quality. Our recommendations generally focused on 3 areas: identifying and correcting the most frequent or complex problems with contracted exams, incorrect financial incentive payments to contractors, and third, a gap in feedback from those who perform disability medical exams. VA generally agreed with these recommendations. As of today, none of the 5 have been fully implemented. In addition, our 2021 report highlighted numerous shortfalls in VA's management of its training for new and experienced claims processors. To address these shortfalls, we made 10 recommendations. As of today, 4 recommendations remain open, including ones to enhance VA's planning and evaluation of its training program. For the final area on program modernization, our prior work has identified various policy options proposed by others for rethinking VA's existing disability benefit structure. For example, our 2012 report examined opportunities and challenges of several policy options. These options included things like integrating vocational services with cash assistance rather than focusing on compensation alone. In summary, addressing the long-standing challenges we've identified requires sustained leadership over the use of leading management practices. And ultimately, this would help ensure veterans receive accurate and timely decisions on their disability compensation claims while also safeguarding taxpayer dollars. This concludes my statement. and I'm happy to address your questions.
Thank you very much. Senator Tuberville.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for your passion. This is a great panel. Thanks for doing this. We spend a lot of time doing things to help our veterans. I come from a military family and it's been very passionate to me. Right benefits for the right veterans. I think that's what our title is here today. I'd like for anybody to answer this. I don't know who to ask this question to, but many of you will remember that under the Veterans Access, Choice, and Accountability Act of 2014, a commission on care was established to develop recommendations to improve the VHA. The call for this commission came after a scandal at the VHA. Don't each of you think that it's time for a commission was established to develop recommendations to improve the VBA, and don't our veterans deserve a system like this with a commission? Anybody want to answer this? Push your button and have at it.
Okay, I guess I'm going to jump in.
You're first. Go ahead.
Yes, I think a commission would be very, very well placed. I think it is needed to look at the VBA process like it's supposed to do at VHA.
Anybody else? Go ahead, Ryan.
Oh, thank you, Senator. I get nervous about the prospect of a commission, and there's a reason why.
Well, we all do.
I remember with the Air Commission, we as an organization were a bit of champions of that, and it couldn't make it past the first marker. You know, and now we're seeing the repercussions of that. I know we're talking about the Benefits Administration, but now with Veterans Health Administration, it's become glaringly obvious that the infrastructure is in the wrong place, and it's resulted in a higher cost for care. I would argue that a forum like this is certainly a good start to have these discussions. I think you know, I know that Dr. Gade and I don't agree on everything, but there are a few things that he said that I know are very, I think we would agree on as far as how we reform the system and incentivizing the right behavior by veterans who are only seeking the benefits that they've earned through their service contract.
Thank you. You know, with the passage and fast-tracked implementation of the PACT Act, it has put a strain on disability claim processes. How can we simplify that? How can we make sure they both work? A lot of money's been put into this. Anybody?
Senator, I'd like to just briefly point out that there are several things in the PACT Act that are not only problematic from a sort of overloading the system point of view, but also problematic from a moral point of view. So here's an example. The PACT Act makes hypertension presumptive condition for all Vietnam veterans who are exposed to Agent Orange. What is not mentioned in the PACT Act or any of the discussion around that is that when you norm for age, sex, and race, non-veterans of those age groups have the same exact hypertension rates as veterans do in those age groups. So we're compensating for something that is, forgive the expression, but old fat people get hypertension. That's going to happen to sort of all of us at some point. But what the PACT Act did was allowed people to shift the responsibility for those lifestyle conditions from themselves to the government and blame the government for problems that are not the fault of the government, and therefore taxpayers are taking a bath on that.
Thank you. So, anybody, what simple changes do we need to make sure disability claims go to the right people? Go ahead, Ron.
Senator, I would say that we need to speed up the science. I think the issue that we see, for example, with Kachikarabad in Uzbekistan, there is a stark difference between what service members who developed rare cancers and rare healthcare conditions while they were still on active duty, gaining those benefits, and then those who the uniform came off, but the condition didn't develop till 15 months after they came off of active duty, and they've been struggling ever since. I think one of the greatest detriments that we have is the time it takes to identify when a toxic exposure has happened and then make that veteran whole. I think because of the framework set forth in the PACT Act, there needs to be some urgency, especially for people like those who served on K2.
Urgency doesn't work up here in federal government, I'll tell you that. We wish it did. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My time's up.
Senator Blumenthal.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you all for being here and for your testimony. Let me ask you, Ms. Kurta, as you know, substantial numbers of VA employees have been cut. And as many as 30,000 will be cut. The original number was 83,000. The uproar in reaction to Secretary Collins' announcement caused it to be reduced. But doesn't that kind of cut in workforce have an impact on the quality of work in processing disability claims?
Well, one of the issues on our high-risk list is the ability of VA to process disability claims and manage the workloads. You know, as we've been discussing, there have been many changes to the what's eligible, and that has increased claims substantially. And over time, VA has had extensive backlogs that they have not been able to keep up with. And so, you know, they have been in a kind of in a pattern of recently of hiring more staff to be able to process those claims, and they have most recently been somewhat successful in bringing the backlogs down and improving timeliness. I don't know how many of those people that you mentioned were actually processing disability claims. I would expect VA to conduct analysis, workforce planning analysis, to see, you know, what would those cuts to staff in the disability claims processing area, what effect would that have on productivity and on these backlogs? Because they were making progress, and I don't know that these particular cuts, you know, are affecting that or not.
But basically, if you cut the number of people doing the work and the work increases, it's going to take longer and possibly be more error-prone.
That's a logical conclusion.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Mr. Gallucci, I was struck by your comment that if there are problems in the programs, we should fix the programs, not blame the veterans. The veterans are not the problem. And I am struck by statements from the administration, including the top levels of the Office of Management and Budget, Russell Vogt, that means testing maybe is a reform that should be adopted. He has suggested that the administration should, quote, target significant cost savings from revising disability rating awards. I haven't heard the Secretary criticize or refute that potential course of action. What do you think of it?
Senator, the idea to restrict benefit payments to service-disabled veterans at a lower percentage, that dates back to the Bradley Commission in the 1950s. It was a recommendation that came out of there at the time, and there was nothing really to substantiate that at the time. One of the things that we often talk about is that we're talking about social and occupational impairment here and lost average earnings potential. And it really should be a dead conversation on means testing for a service-connected disability. That's very different, right? I mean, there is means testing for pension, but we're talking about a service-incurred disability. It's a very different scenario. We see nothing in Title 38 that would allow for that, right, without a change from Congress that we would vocally oppose. There's a philosophy there that when you sign that contract, and it's the final clause, it's the clause in the contract that says, we will send you to, you'll be ordered to deploy to combat or other hazardous situations. And I worry sometimes we lose the focus on that other hazardous situations point. The Washington Post did that in their article, talked about what they presume to be non-service related conditions or common conditions, and that could probably be a whole other hearing to break down how those are service related because of the unique nature of military service. And then when you're talking about those lower percentages, the occupational impairment that comes with that, time off for medical appointments, underemployment, those are real issues for veterans that face chronic health conditions that require consistent care.
we don't need a commission to tell us that we ought to sustain disability benefits for injured veterans, do we?
I think it's an obligation of our country to honor the enlistment contract, the contract that we all signed, and provide the care and benefits that we've earned.
Exactly. Let me just, one last question for Mr. Retzger. You told me that VSOs have been excluded from the space that they have at regional offices. Could you tell the committee about that fact?
Thank you for that question. Thank you for that question. And yes, unfortunately, our national service officers around the country who have been co-located within the VA regional offices are not allowed to conduct normal business to be able to assist the veterans, even though that the VA regional offices are closed. We were only allowed 30 minutes. And an example is in North Carolina, we unfortunately went there one morning and we had over 180 pieces of mail. And when you look at that, those are time-sensitive issues with effective dates to file initial claims and evidence to support pending claims and so on. And it makes it very difficult for us, even though our team is ready to provide services at home doing telework. We've been ready because of the pandemic, prepared us to do that. But what we are seeing is that our service officers, unfortunately, now have to deal with the PII, taking information out of the regional office and to do that work and, you know, be responsible, and they are. But the thing is, it really drives a wedge in our process because within the VA regional office, we have the capacity of technology and the resources to do secure work. And we're very disappointed, and we hope that the VA will open back up for all organizations that are accredited in there, because this is the first time in any shutdown that we are actually not allowed to stay in.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And I've spoken to others about it. I don't know whether that's the experience of other VSOs as well. Is that true of VFW, Mr. Gallucci? It is. Okay.
Yes, it's the common experience for those of us who utilize space in those federal facilities. And this morning, we were also notified by General Counsel that the processing of accreditations is not considered an accepted activity.
I might ask, and I have mentioned it to Inspector General Mason, and perhaps she can look into it. Thank you. Thank you all. Thanks, Mr. Chairman.
You're welcome. Senator Roanoke.
Thank you. I think when you read the Washington Post recent article, it really gives the impression that the whole system of ratings and disability payments and all that are fraught with peril and fraud. So as Mr. Gallucci said, you know, a system as large as that there will be fraud. So what I'd like to ask the Inspector General Mason is, a system like this, a program like this is going to have fraud. My concern would be that do we have the capacity within the VA to investigate fraud? And I'm not sure who prosecutes the fraud, whether the VA has lawyers that does that or whether that has to go to the Attorney General's office. But really, I would like to know what kind of capacity is in the VA to investigate fraud, meaning that has the entity that would, I guess it would be your office, Ms. Mason, that would investigate fraud. Have you
Yes.
seen reductions in the number of people in your office?
So Senator Hirono, let me answer that question. So it is our office that is charged with that duty to investigate and work with DOJ, primarily the Assistant U.S. Attorneys, and as well as local, law enforcement to go after the fraud, and we do that. To go after fraud, there does have to be a threshold, though, of intent. So there has to be corroborating evidence and facts. So our office does that. As far as the number of people we do have that currently in the shutdown. My investigators, that's who's working.
Oh, excuse me, why don't we go well, I'd like to ask the question relating to pre-shutdown. So the last IG had over 1,000 staff.
That's
Is
correct.
that what you have? Do you have 1,000 staff
Currently,
people?
we have approximately 1,000 staff prior to shutdown. OPM did authorize me to, through exemptions, to hire 35 additional staff across the OIG, which included 2 investigators, and we were proceeding to do that, but shutdown got in the way.
Yeah, we can end the shutdown if a certain party decides to restore health care to the American people, but we won't get into that right now. So you have the same number of people then that your predecessor had, and that you have authority to hire 35 more people. Do you consider that enough of a staff, enough capacity to deal with the millions and millions of veterans that you are dealing with? And I don't know how many hundreds of thousands of claims that you are being asked to review?
Well, so let me clarify that real quick, Senator. So prior to, in the beginning of 25, we had 1175-ish people. We lost about 100 people due to DRP and VERA and normal attrition. So we are at about 1,000 right now. My budget, as presumed, we think is going to be able to allow me to hire additional 70 people. OPM has given me credit for 35.
Yes,
However, we don't go after the claims. We don't adjudicate the claims. We investigate fraud, and we do oversight of the department who does all those claims. But we have the people to do that.
Okay, so there's another office within the VA that has oversight over the claimants, and you have all these people who have to determine ratings and
That's the veterans of, that's,
extent of the disability, et cetera, that leads to certain amounts being paid. So then let me ask you this then, do you think that you have enough capacity to investigate all of the fraud that you think is out there?
we do. Primarily, majority of our work, Senator, is in education and healthcare and fiduciary fraud, as well as a significant some compensation. But as I testified earlier,
so
you would.
I'm running out of time. So you would take issue with the Washington Post article that seems to indicate there's massive fraud going on in the VA system.
There is no massive fraud going on. I take issue. Yes.
I want to thank the other people who have testified from the VSOs because you are right there on the ground and you're dealing with the veterans. And I know from the veterans that I hear from that there are delays in getting their ratings, and there are any number of ways that the system can be improved. And we heard from Ms. Curdo, from GAO about a number of recommendations that could improve the system, and the indications seem to be that the VA has not made the kind of changes that were recommended. Would those of you who represent VSOs, would you agree that these recommendations have not been complied with or met? Anybody want to weigh in briefly, because my time is already up?
I would agree that oversight and quality controls need to be there. When we're talking about fraud or questionable claims, I point to one of the examples in the Washington Post story where they talked about a veteran who received benefits for an accident while they were related to a DUI. I believe that that's a quality control thing. And there are things that are supposed to be considered willful misconduct that don't qualify for benefits. And that when something like that is found, that VA has the quality controls in place to make sure that they're not awarding benefits in the situation that they shouldn't.
And do you think they do have those quality controls in place?
I think they need to improve on those quality controls, ma'am. Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Senator Blackburn.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I've got just a couple of questions, but before I start, I do want to correct the record. Republicans are not denying health care to anyone. There is a discussion over the Biden bonus credits that were given during COVID, and our colleagues across the aisle could end the shutdown today by voting for a clean CR, which these are numbers they have voted for
Mr. Chairman,
many
I was
times.
good enough not to get into it, and I would ask the same for my colleague.
And then also, I would note that the claims backlog that was referenced happened during the last administration, and we discussed this at length in hearing after hearing, with the fact that workers were working remotely, and of course, and Ms. Mason, I want to come to you on this because the PACT Act implementation caused a lot of confusion. And there was the warning of we had a $3 billion shortfall, and it was going to require emergency spending. And then, of course, we found out later that this was just a budgeting boondoggle, and the implementation of the PACT Act, the VA systems couldn't handle it, and there was no shortfall, but this frightened a lot of our veterans and their families. And the good news is we've got some leadership at the VA now that is straightening this out, and we are grateful for that. And what I'd like to hear from you is what your sense of how well the VA leadership is following through on your recommendations to tighten oversight and prevent that kind of misstep from taking place again.
Senator Blackburn, to answer your question, we have done a series of reports in the OIG's office to point out the lack of controls and oversight within VBA around particularly PACT Act, especially with the fact that they have scattered guidance all over the place and their manual is not in compliance with the law. Right now, they tell us they have a plan. I don't, we haven't seen anything. They are partially shut down. They are doing claims. We haven't seen anything yet, but we are following up, and we have further evaluations to look at and audits to do once we get back in business.
Okay. And Mr. Gade, thank you for your testimony. And I noted in there that you made a strong case that the disability system sometimes will trap veterans. So what is the first couple of things that you think Congress could change that would help clean the system up?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you for that question. So the very first thing that I think ought to be changed is how we talk about the word disability. So only in the VA system are flat feet a disability. Only in the VA system is tinnitus a disability, because what we have is an overbroad definition of the word. If we went to the ACS, the American Community Survey definition, or we went to any other publicly available definition, like the Social Security disability definition, what we would have is the ability then to put more money to things that matter, things like employment, things like rehabilitation, things like medical care, and less money in transfer payments that we know are causing people to be sicker and to be trapped in this cycle of malaise. So that's the very first thing I would say.
Okay, and Ms. Curta, would you agree with that? Because you've weighed in some on this system.
Yeah, in our testimony, we did work some years ago where we looked at all the commissions that have looked at reform options for the disability system and summarized those positions, the advantages, the disadvantages. I don't know that, there's a kind of one right answer there. It's a policy call, and there are no changes that don't come without some kind of a cost. One way or another, there'll be winners, there'll be losers. There will be costs to administer more complex systems. I mean, it has to be looked at very carefully.
But you had referenced the high-risk areas for mismanagement, and that being one of them.
Well, for sure, they have not updated the schedule for how they decide those compensation levels within existing law.
Excellent. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Bozeman.
Thank you, Senator Moran, Senator Blumenthal, for really bringing kind of the who's who of experts on this issue. We appreciate you all being here and again on such an important topic. While we have recently seen progress ensuring veterans are receiving claims decisions in a timely manner and provided adequate benefits that align with their service, there's still more work to do. As evidence, I have veterans in my state waiting on decisions for years and years, some perishing before they can get a final ruling after years of waiting. I'm confident in the VA's disability system, but that confidence comes not without the desire to continue pushing it forward to best serve our nation's heroes. Mr. Gade, I'm interested in the principle meaningful employment is a powerful medicine. You outlined in your testimony, like you, I believe that active participation in the workforce and larger society serves as a powerful remedy to some of the issues our veterans face. What ideas do you have for this committee and the VA on how we could support that principle through the compensation system without creating fear or hesitation among veterans about losing their benefits?
Thanks, sir. In my written testimony that I submitted for the committee, there's a report of something called the Independence Project that I also referred to in my oral testimony. And the Independence Project was a randomized control trial where we took two groups of veterans and we gave one certain benefits and we did not give anything to the other. We just monitored them. And the veterans who were given incentives up front to thrive were able to do so, and those gains in employment, not only in the percent of them who were employed, but also in their salaries, and their gains in physical and mental health sustained far after the incentive payments ended. So what you have is the ability right there, the scientific basis exists to put incentives in place to get the kind of positive outcomes that we want and to not get the negative outcomes that we want.
Very good. Ms. Carter, GAO has laid out the need for VA to follow leading management practices when it undertakes reforms of the disability compensation program. Would you elaborate on the downsides of failing to do this?
Sure. Thank you for that question. When we set out to look at how they manage reforms at VA, the first question we asked was, how many initiatives do you have ongoing? And they couldn't tell us. We had to assemble that list, and these were significant initiatives. There were 23 of them over a 3-year period that we looked at. We pulled a sample of 5 of those randomly and compared them to how are they being managed, for success, and found lots of issues. We made a lot of recommendations to improve those initiatives because they weren't setting goals, they weren't involving key stakeholders, they weren't monitoring progress. In particular, one of them was looking at the creating specialized teams to evaluate military sexual trauma claims, which are very complex and very different from other kinds of claims. And we found that across the board, they did not have clear goals with measurable outcomes. They did not have clear leadership oversight. There were recommendations from the IG that didn't get implemented. It was never clear what they were making changes to how things got done, but it was never clear that anything was approved as a result of that. So that's the kind of thing. It's important to have goals. It's important to know where you're headed before you start down the path, and that ability to then be able to tell the Congress and the public that this investment had a payoff.
So is that a cultural thing or poor leadership, or what? With it being so broad in the group that you studied, it's not like it was a one-off.
I think there's perhaps a culture. There's lots of fires to put out all the time at VA, and there's a culture of, oh, let's put together a tiger team and fix this right away and be in a hurry. And I think sometimes they don't have a good system in place to ensure that when they get started, they have that kind of good plan in place. And that was one of our high priority recommendations for the Secretary, is to put in place a policy that if you're going to start a major reform initiative, that it have these elements in place before you start, so that you'll know where they're headed.
Right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Shih.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you all for being here today. As a fellow combat veteran of multiple tours, married to a combat veteran, I take these issues very seriously, and I want to echo some comments made from our VFW partners about some poisonous and disgusting rhetoric from the Washington Post recently that accused our veteran community and our broader veteran service organization community of fraud, of taking advantage of the American people. When this group of people, this body of veterans, raised their hand and swore an oath to defend this country, the system's not perfect. There's no question. The VA is not perfect. Veterans are not perfect, and there is fraud, no doubt. But the byline of that rhetoric should not be attacking the people that chose to defend this nation. It should be an internal examination of how we do things better in this government and how we make the VA focused on veteran outcomes and patient outcomes and not process. We've been lost in the bureaucracy for too long in the VA. It's about time we have a customer service-oriented organization that's focused on optimal outcomes for veterans. Outcomes for veterans. Veterans, not victims, is my favorite saying. We're not victims. We don't come back sorry, asking for handouts. We come back wanting a new mission in life and wanting to be empowered to continue to serve our country in law enforcement, in government service, even in entrepreneurs. We want our veterans to come home and be empowered, not treated like victims. But sometimes they need that help to do so. And I'd welcome your thoughts specifically. I think Dr. Cade related to specifically how does our incentive system within disability claims, how's our incentive system within the transition process? Are we incentivizing veterans to succeed at the end of that process, or instead are we driving them into a cul-de-sac of dependence? Because ultimately we want to help them as a bridge to another successful chapter in life. We don't want them to be professional veterans when they're done. We want them to be done and be proud of their service, but then open a new chapter for their life and succeed there.
Sir, thanks for that question. When I went through the transition assistance program when I was leaving the military, we spent about half a day on employment stuff and about a day and a half on how to file disability claims. And the proverbial little lady in tennis shoes stood up there and said, claim everything you can. It's free money. All you got to do is go get it. And if you have these conditions, you get this. But if you look at the DBQ carefully, and she like stomped on the floor and said, if you look at the DBQ carefully, you can see that if you have these conditions, you can get to 70%. And if you have these conditions, you can get to 100%. And so it was right there in front of people that all you have to do is exaggerate and you can get paid more. That's not actually my main problem. My main problem is what happens then. Because if a veteran is separated from the labor market, they don't work anymore, they're sitting at home, they're sitting on the couch, their wife is going to work, if it's a male veteran, the children are going to school, and what happens when those people come back home is the veteran is still sitting there. And that's a life of disempowerment, not empowerment. And men get so much identity from their work that we ought to be putting all of our effort into positive, meaningful, gainful employment and get away from saying to everybody, hey, get everything you can from the government. All you got to do is fill out this little form and we'll give you disability payments. Thank you.
That's exactly right. And disability is too oftentimes confused that if you're able to work, you don't deserve that disability. And the truth is that disability is a recognition that you're going to carry that injury, that condition for the rest of your life, and you can never heal from that because of what you did for this country. What do we think about alternatives to how the disability system is currently structured? And this is open to anybody. I mean, how can we better structure this so that after our veterans leave, take the uniform off, we're incentivizing them to find new careers and succeed in those careers, but still recognizing they have conditions they have to live with?
Sir, if I may really quick, the way that we talk about disability is different than any other program talks about disability. The bar is much lower, the conditions are much broader. If, and I'm not making this proposal necessarily, but if we were to take the people 60% and below in 2024 annual benefits report, and we were to say, you know what, those are conditions that we're going to treat for, but we're not going to compensate for those because they're not a disability by any other definition of the word. What you would do is you would save $20 billion a year that you could then put towards meaningful job programs. You could put towards internships and externships and education and even higher benefits for the triple amputee and the person with a traumatic brain injury. There's a way to do this that's smart and that incentivizes the right things, and that's what I'm just begging folks to focus on.
But we're at the end of my 5 minutes, so I'm sorry. You want to wrap up quick?
Yes, Senator, I just wanted to say, it's very important that we understand, yes, we know about the injuries and illnesses, but the thing is we have questions with regards to integration into rehabilitation, and then there's compensation. We need to understand that it's complementary. And we need to ensure that when we look at the VA's stability of it, that VA's integrated care links the issues really. That's healthcare, vocational programs, and education. That's the struggle that we're having here. And so VA needs to continue to expand programs like the Veterans Readiness Employment System while they ensure that the veterans are getting their compensation. As you said, they have earned these benefits. So we want to make sure that they strengthen the partnerships that are out there to employees and workforces to ensure that they are hiring and recruiting veterans and really emphasize that there's a difference between the integration back into employment versus compensation.
Well, thank you for being here. We're at the end of our nation's longest war, and we may potentially be seeing the start of another war soon. So the work you're doing is going to be absolutely critical. Veterans, not victims. Outcomes over process. Patience over bureaucracy. Thank you.
Sir Sheehy, thank you. Sir Duckworth.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have to say I must express disappointment in the decision to convene a legislative hearing that amplifies the Washington Post's misleading and flawed attack against the VA disability benefit system, especially by inviting a witness who supports those sentiments. And adding insult to injury, this effort to falsely depict our nation's disabled veterans as a group of dishonest fraudsters and cheaters originates from a paper that is owned by a multi-billionaire whose net worth exceeds by tens of billions of dollars the total amount that the United States government spends on disability compensation to over 6 million disabled veterans in any given year. Look, nobody's denying the unfortunate reality that a small number of veterans exist who will dishonor their own service and that of their fellow veterans by defrauding the VA. These individuals can and should be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. If we want to enhance deterrence, we should strengthen enforcement resources to increase the rates of criminal investigations, prosecutions, and convictions of these fraudsters. The mistake we must avoid is allowing a minority of criminals to dictate the redesign of the VA disability benefit system into a bureaucratic black box that is more frustrating and less fair and will leave more veterans waiting and dying, waiting to get their benefits that they've earned. Since we met many years ago at Walter Reed, I've been disappointed, Colonel Gade, in watching your journey. You and I were there together. We suffered together. We recovered together. But I have to say, I've been disappointed in watching your journey to becoming one of the leading critics of the entire concept of disability compensation for disabled veterans. And I do feel that you believe that you're simply offering our fellow disabled veterans some tough love that everyone else is too afraid to give to inspire them to achieve the success that you've been so very fortunate to earn. However, your rhetoric, particularly in downplaying the severity of the reality of the invisible wounds of war, runs the real risk of doing more harm than good. Portraying disabled veterans as a group of takers who will happily never work again for $3,100 per month is incredibly condescending and disrespectful to these heroic Americans. Disabled veterans, like any American, want to work for more than just money. They're driven by a sense of mission, purpose, and meaning. And your characterization of disabled veterans who accept disability compensation as being moochers who are trapped by the system advances a very damaging stereotype that shames many veterans into foregoing VA benefits at a cost to themselves and their loved ones. So there's an irony that the VA is being accused of being too generous, too trusting, and too focused on enhancing efficiency for disabled veterans by a paper whose owner is famous for accumulating a vast fortune by adopting a core management principle, obsessive customer focus. So my question for the VSO leaders on the panel is simple. Do our disabled veterans deserve worse treatment from the United States government?
No, they don't.
No, they do not.
Should Congress require VA to presume that every disabled veteran applying for benefits is guilty of fraud?
They shouldn't, because they're not.
Should VA force every disabled veteran to fight through copious amounts of paperwork and push through layer upon layer of code, harsh bureaucracy to prove, beyond a reasonable doubt, to obtain what are often quite modest disability compensation benefits?
Senator, no.
We must never forget that Congress and VA have worked hard for many decades to end an unacceptable status quo where the VA benefit system was hostile, combative, and stunningly inefficient. My larger fear is that our committee indulging in efforts to demonize the VA disability benefit system will lead us to creating a harmful guardrails that do reduce improper payments, but at the cost of scores of eligible disabled veterans giving up and abandoning efforts to secure the benefits they earned when they served our country in uniform. Would any of the witnesses testifying on behalf of VSOs like to elaborate on that threat and why criticism of VA trying to instill a culture that seeks the let's get to yes is preferable to a culture that seeks to get to no?
Senator, I will happily take that question if I may. As I said in my remarks and in our submission for the record, we have deliberately worked to make it easier for veterans to access the benefits that they've earned. Those of us who have worn the uniform have seen it where peers of ours struggle for the care for the diseases or the health conditions that they're suffering with. In addition to Kachikarabad, our organization's advocating for air crews. Congress just passed a study to make sure that air crews, and it was signed into law, that we study their toxic exposures. There's a group of veterans, submariners, and the veterans of foreign wars who are speaking very vocally about the unique challenges of submarine service and the exposures that they have. Now, make no mistake, we all knew that military service was dangerous, but as we've focused on when we say honor the contract, it was in our enlistment contracts. It's in there, required to order to serve in combat or other hazardous situations, and then entitled to receive pay allowances and other benefits as provided by law and regulation. So to have a discussion where it's portraying veterans accessing that system as if we're somehow exploiting loopholes and it's an honor system, look, it's trying to pit veterans against Americans, other Americans. And it's something that we shouldn't tolerate, especially when such a small percentage of the population volunteered for that dangerous job that has occupational hazards that others can just walk away from.
The data is clear, and it's not just data coming from the VA, but from other or not-for-profits, that the vast majority of veterans' claims for benefits are truthful and accurate, not that they're fraudulent and false. And I think we need to keep that in mind. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Duckworth, thank you. I thank all of our witnesses, and I just highlight for the committee and perhaps for my own satisfaction, there's no doubt about what the controversy that arises from this Washington Post article, but I have great faith in the witnesses that we have here, the veterans who have talked to us, the information that we've received to suggest that this committee is capable of hearing from veterans and responding to the thought that is expressed in the Washington Post article. I also have sufficient faith in the colleagues here, many who have served, some who have served and earned disability, that we have the capability as members of this committee to sort out and have the opportunity also to hear from somebody who has a different point of view so that we can come to a conclusion, probably more than one, conclusions over time about how we improve the system, and we make certain that veterans who served and those who are disabled by that service receive the compensation as well as care that they're entitled to. So I'm pleased we've had this hearing, having this hearing, and I think it has value as we try to sort out how we make things sufficiently better for those who served our country. I want to ask a couple of questions, and then a vote has been called, and we'll bring this hearing to a conclusion. First of all, Ms. Mason, Senator Blackburn asked you about Inspector General's report. Are there any particular reports that are pending on this topic of disability that you would like to highlight that would be important for the VA to come into compliance or explain why they are not pursuing the Inspector General's recommendations?
Well, we have about 30.
All of them equal importance, and all of them on this topic?
All of them equal important, but I think we have 2 or 3 particularly that are pending on disability issues, but we have some audit work that we're getting ready to start, primarily around quality review, primarily around automation, particularly, and concerns we have around whether the right information is in the automation system. And then again to the reports we've already discussed today on PACT Act and a couple of the other areas in disability that our fraud teams and our audit teams work very closely together. And so where they see gaps on either side, they trade information, and the fraud team goes and investigates, and the audit team does their audit work. So we do have some others teed up. We only have a couple of reports, though, that are pending, and they are primarily on the quality aspect as well as the application of overall disability review.
In your previous life and previous work at the Department of Veterans Affairs, anything that you learned in that capacity that would be important for us to hear today?
Well, Chairman Moran, in my current seat, I look at everything through the eyes of the IG. But what I can tell you in looking at those through the eyes of IG, I can look back over the 30 years from starting as a young attorney in 1990 going forward to my time as judge and chairman, where I can see many of the things that VA put in place, that the Congress has put in place, and I see the impacts and effects of that on our veterans. And particularly what I see is the lack of controls and the lack of oversight within actually all of VA, but particularly for this hearing, particularly in VBA, in particular areas from compensation to education to pension to fiduciary. We can go down the whole list.
I want to highlight, at least from my view, a great level of respect for the role of the Inspector General, the role of the Government Accountability Office in this committee and this Congress being able to do its work. I'm developing a good working relationship with you, Ms. Mason, and I had a really good working relationship with your predecessor. And my view is that the efforts by both of these agencies are hugely valuable to the well-being of veterans that we all try to serve.
And we do talk to each other often, Chairman Moran, both you and I and Ms. Curta and her team.
Thank you both. Mr. Gallucci, you did something just a moment ago that I was going to ask you to do. I wanted to know what a member of the service believes when they enlist that their contract is with the United States government, with the Department of Veterans Affairs, with the American people, with our country, with our government. When someone raises their hand and takes the oath and enters the service, what is it that they expect in return?
To put it in the simplest terms, that if we're going to live up to these other requirements, to obey all lawful orders, subject to the military justice system, serving in combat and other hazardous situations, that will be taken care of if something goes wrong on the government's time and on the government's dime. I point in the Washington Post story, we've talked about this a lot, about them talking about toenail fungus, right? That was in there designed to really bait people into thinking, well, that's common. That happens to a lot of Americans. You go to a gym, you get athlete's foot, you treat it with some Tenactin. I don't know. But the issue is we're talking about military service, especially ground forces, Army, Marine Corps, that focus so heavily on foot health and hygiene. Because when I was deployed to Iraq, OIF-1, living out of a Humvee for the first couple of months, personal hygiene was sparse and difficult. And I talked to a veteran before coming into this hearing who has dealt with a systemic fungal infection since he served in the Marine Corps. This is very real. It's an occupational hazard. It may sound odd to someone who's never served, a reader of the Washington Post or a reporter who never raised their right hand, but that's why it's service-connected. A veteran who's on a medication that causes liver damage because it started out as a foot fungal infection, started as toenail fungus. Yes, that's service-connected. It's related to service, and it's a clear occupational hazard of military service.
Thank you. And do those individuals, they know that at the moment they enlist and raise their right hand?
You don't know all of them, but I'll tell you this: we know the military is dangerous, right?
Right.
Its job, as our Secretary of War says, is to destroy our enemies. I mean, we know it's dangerous going in, but we believe that with the contract that we signed, if something goes wrong, that we will be taken care of.
Dr. Gade raised this topic of work, and I certainly share a view that work is important to the well-being of every human being. It is a way we earn a living and get satisfaction, hopefully, from what we do. I always think it's something that's within us that gives us purpose in life, soul, a sense of meaning and value. What is it that we can do? Dr. Gade indicates that there's a seemingly a disincentive from the disability system to work. But aside from that suggestion, of that connection, there's a lot of things that the Department of Veterans Affairs is entrusted to do and should be doing to help veterans find meaningful employment. And I saw where a group of Fort Riley soldiers who were about to end their time in the military service Spent time in Wichita, Kansas at the aviation and aircraft companies learning about opportunities for their future. There is a significant demand for the skill set and integrity, the moral values of a soldier, of a member of our military. There's demand for that work. And yet we may not be taking the sufficient advantage of the opportunity that a person who is leaving military service can provide value to a company. I love it when we've got a program in Kansas to interest soldiers as they depart in agriculture, to become farmers. There's a demand for those kind of employment opportunities, and what are we missing in trying to make certain that work is honored, aside from the suggestions of Dr. Gade?
If I could,
Mr. Villanueva?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I was worried you were being ignored until Senator Duckworth captured you.
No, I appreciate it. There's a lot of good panelists here, and I definitely don't want to step on anybody's toes when it comes to, how much we all agree with each other. But the one thing I think everybody on this panel can agree with is that every veteran who wants to work and is inhibited by a disability, that they have every incentive and opportunity to get to work. And again, I guess I have to be 100% for all the hearings I ever testify at to bring up VRNE, but VRNE should definitely be pushed more so than most any other program that they have out there for veterans who want to get back out to work. And that includes doing things like removing delimiting dates. That goes for education by the VA to all veterans to say, hey, especially those who are being medically discharged or medically retired, to push that program and to say, if you want to get back out to work, it is available to you. And, we've been on record about this. So, we would love to work with, yourself, your office, the rest of the members of the committee to see, how we can do that.
Remind me, is there opportunities that are presented to veterans who have a disability beyond the normal programs to work, to provide education, workforce training to veterans generally?
There are. But again, not a lot of the veterans who, when they leave the service, right, know that there's a disability with them, right? It comes up years and years later. Myself, I went out and, despite some of my disabilities, I decided to take up blue-collar work for the first 5 years post-service, and it caught up to me. Only after that time did I ever find out or ever attempt to use my GI Bill, and never once until many years later did I even hear about VRNE. So again, this should be pushed, by the VA.
Thank you. I look forward to working with you and paralyzed PVA. Senator Banks?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Curta, the VA disability claims process is dysfunctional and antiquated, no doubt. An initial claim decision takes about 100 days on average, but appeals stretch on for years. My office worked on one case, for example, that a claim that took 8 years to be decided. How are VA's efforts to improve that process coming along?
Well, as I mentioned earlier, one of our issues that places VA on the high-risk list is their challenges with managing their workloads, and that includes appeals. This has been going on for decades, where various surges come along on the initial claims side. Veterans who are denied appeal those claims. That creates, additional pressure on the appeals side. And when veterans choose to go, before a judge, that is the longest amount of time that a veteran will experience. There are other choices, but that one in particular can take a really long time. And currently, VA is not meeting its timeliness goals for various appeals options. They're exceeding them. I think what they're doing is we've been engaging with them on this high-risk issue for a number of years now, and most recently they have developed a better ability to predict their workloads through more sophisticated modeling. That is certainly true on the initial claim side. I think they're trying to kind of do a little bit more on the appeals side to be able to better predict what's coming in. And when you can predict, you can plan. and you can, get the resources that you need to get the work done. So they are moving along. They still are somewhat lacking in their, I think, capacity to really fix the problems. But we were close to moving up their rating in the high-risk issue last year, and that budget issue came along, and we had to kind of rethink that. But they have made progress in terms of their just ability to plan for workloads, and then so that when things do change, and they will change, they're in a position to address them.
The key tool in the claims process, the VA Rating Schedule for Disabilities, was created in the 1940s. Some elements of the schedule have never been updated. The VA has been trying to update it for years. Which conditions and body parts rating schedules are the most outdated, and what problems does that cause, Ms. Curda?
Sure. I would say the issue is that they haven't all been comprehensively updated. There have been small changes over the years, here and there, but they haven't taken a comprehensive look at, there's 15 body systems. All the conditions are organized in different body systems. Of the 15, they have updated comprehensively 11 of them. And there are still 4 that remain, and they are in various states of regulatory development. The 4 that are remaining are mental disorders, respiratory illnesses, ear and auditory issues, and neurological conditions. And so, the problem that creates, and I think you can see a little bit of this in the Washington Post article, where you might see inequities, or it might appear to be an inequity in how different conditions are compensated. I think in particular, when this was studied, mental conditions have been, because if you think about it, in the 1940s, people hadn't even heard of PTSD. So that may be compensated differently than, say, someone with an amputation. And so it's thinking through what that level of compensation should be. The other issue is earnings loss. That's the medical side I was talking about. The earnings part of it has never been comprehensively updated, and so that is another component of this.
I want to move on. Colonel Gade, good to see you. Nice to see you, sir. I'm glad the OIG investigates disability compensation fraud, but the examples in the Washington Post article aren't subtle. They're glaring. A Vietnam veteran who pretended to be blind for 29 years while he continued to drive. A bodybuilder who pretended to walk with a cane and wore a diaper. A veteran who claimed paralyzing anxiety and inability to work while he was running a bar in Costa Rica. A VA claims representative who claimed to be homebound and bilked the agency out of benefits for 5 years while he was working there. These fraud cases shouldn't take years to crack, and it makes me wonder how widespread that problem really is. How prevalent do you think outright disability compensation fraud really is?
Sir, I think outright disability fraud is actually quite rare, as Ms. Mason pointed out earlier. A bigger problem is the problem of lax oversight and easily exaggerated conditions and no follow-up. So I went on Reddit yesterday and I typed in, how do I get a 100% disability? I only have 10% now, which is, false. So here's what Reddit said. Go to your CMP exam with a DBQ that you filled out yourself. Look up what you will qualify for, 100%, and check the boxes and write the explanations that apply to you. Submit that to your examiner at the beginning of the appointment and have a copy in front of you. Throughout the exam, answer the questions based on the answers you gave on the DBQ. So it's widespread that people know that the DBQ exists. They know that if they claim this severity, they get this disability. If they claim this severity, they get this. And if they claim this, then they get this. It's widespread knowledge. And so that's a kind of quiet thing that the Washington Post article never even discussed.
Got it. Thank you. My time has expired.
Let me see if anyone, before we conclude this hearing, does anybody have the sense that they wanted to say something that they didn't get the chance to say, or correct anything that you said that you wish you hadn't have said?
Chairman, I would like to jump in here real quick.
Please.
The VA OIG looks at pretty much everything from soup to nuts from fraud, as well as the oversight, as we've discussed today. But one particular area that I think Senator Banks just touched on and Colonel Gade touched on are the DBQs. And let me be clear. the DBQs are a problem both publicly and internally. They're, because of the lack of controls, and we have specific reports to this as to issues that VBA is not following up on within their internal contracts and their DBQs. They are the pot calling the kettle black. So there are issues with public-facing DBQs. There have been since they were engaged and brought forward, and those continue both internally and externally. So our recommendation is that we look at and we recommend that the committee consider looking at all DBQs and setting some standards at your level. Thank you.
Anyone else? Mr. Gade?
And
Senator, just briefly, and I'm sorry that she departed earlier, Senator Duckworth and I were in the hospital together. She was wounded 2 months before I was. And so I wish that we had been able to have that conversation that she directed to me in a two-way direction, but unfortunately I had to sit here. What I believe about mental health reform is that the system should better address invisible wounds like PTSD, but without incentivizing long-term disability. PTSD is curable. PTSD is possible to recover from and lead a full and thriving life. But a veteran who's labeled 100% permanent and total before the efforts have been made to get better is one whose life is made worse by that system. And that's been my argument for the last 20 years, and it will be my argument until my dying day. And I'm sorry that Senator Duckworth missed that.
Anyone else? This is I didn't expect anyone to take advantage of my suggestion. You can't allow me to miss my vote.
Yeah, I'll make this quick, Mr. Chairman. The most worrying thing about the Washington Post article, and as a person, like many people who are on this panel today, we remember the history, and the history goes back a ways. But when you look at the Civil War pension program that these folks came back to, after a while, the articles and the news and the public opinion shifted away from that it's the government's fault that's making it too hard, and they put a glaring light on the veterans and the doctors and the lawyers, and they scrapped the program. And as we all know, that went from that to the Spanish-American pension program, which preceded the bonus marches of the 1930s. And we're less than a half mile away from where thousands of veterans camped out for days, and some of them lost their lives for their benefits. Now, as we move forward and this discussion moves forward, we should always keep that in mind so that it never, ever happens again. If there is a program that can be improved, that's here already, we should all work together to make those improvements.
Thank you. It's a good place, a good place to end the hearing. Thank you. I want to again thank you. Each member of the committee now has 5 legislative days to submit any written statements or questions for the record. Any senator who would like to submit a question for the record to today's witness needs to, I didn't say that quite right, let's do it over. Each member has 5 legislative days in which to submit statements or questions for the record. Any senator who would like to submit a question for the record for today's witnesses, please do so in a timely manner. Likewise, I ask our witnesses to respond to any question for the record following today's hearing in a timely manner as well. And with that, this hearing is adjourned. Thank you.